it just starts at the early stages, at the first stages of design of understanding the environment, understanding the application, what it's going to be up against, and then designing. From picking the first parts all the way to the final coatings on the enclosure. You got to make sure everything is designed to withstand that environment.
On this episode of Embedded Insiders, we're kicking things off with a look at the escalating race among tech giants to build the most competitive AI models. As Apple, Microsoft, Google, and OpenAI reshuffle teams and refocus priorities, Ken and I break down what these moves mean for the future of AI. Next, in a sponsored segment, we're joined by Jeff Baldwin, Director of Engineering at Sea-Level Systems, to talk through the best practices for designing at the edge and how sea-level systems can help, especially when rugged systems meet AI workloads. Then, Rich sits down with Marcus Webster, founder and president of Webster & Webster Associates, to unpack some of the emerging downsides of AI in the job market, including how candidates are using falsified resumes and video interviews to secure roles they may not be qualified for. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Embedded Insiders podcast. I'm Assistant Managing Editor Tiara Oliver, and I'm joined, as always, with our Editor-in-Chief, Ken Briota. How are you, Ken?
Thanks for having me, Tiara. Always a pleasure.
So today, I thought we would speak about something I saw recently in the news, and of course, I'm sure the general public kind of knows about AI being everywhere, of course, but it's also... I was thinking of this race of competitive AI models and all the big tech companies, racing to get their AI software to the front. And so I saw recently Apple's head of AI stepping down while the corporate vice president of AI from Microsoft is stepping in to replace. Thought that was a pretty big change.
That is. I know you've got even more news on this front, but that one in particular is really interesting to me. Obviously, Apple and Microsoft have been sort of tete-a-tete forever, and this is just the newest front in that competitive space. But interesting that Apple would be poaching from Microsoft here, because Microsoft hasn't been in the lead on AI stuff yet, and Apple has been pretty conservative in putting, they've had Siri for a long time, but they haven't been really pushing their generative AI stuff yet. So I wonder if this signals a move toward more Gen AI tools, maybe tied in with Siri, maybe with something else. That is really interesting news. And I wonder what it means for Microsoft too, because Microsoft has not been winning. It doesn't seem like they've got a lot of traction either.
Yeah, and along with Apple and Microsoft, we also have OpenAI, which is supposedly setting aside smaller projects to just improve their ChatGPT technology. And then, of course, there's Google AI with their Gemini software, which is...
Yeah. Gemini is interesting. In this space, I think Gemini is the most interesting, because ChatGPT and OpenAI famously loses money on every single query done on their platform. So I'm not surprised that they're trying to get some focus in. They do have shareholders or at least investors that they need to deliver returns to. And most of their revenue, such as it is coming from big partnerships with big companies, not from individual memberships and stuff. But yeah, there's don't quote me on these numbers, but I think it was around $5 a query it costs them in terms of energy and water use and stuff like that for cooling. But and obviously it doesn't cost people $5. They can make queries for free in some cases. So even if it's $1 a query, they're still losing money. So it's not surprising. I hope that they're going to be working on energy efficiency in part in their servers, but also more efficient process. Because I don't know, I am not sold on Chat GPT at all as a functional tool. I think it's a toy more than a tool. I certainly don't think it's got the right levels of security or efficiency for any industrial or enterprise client to be using it. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. Gemini is a little different because it's on all the, it's native to all the Android devices, the newest ones anyway. So I think Gemini is interesting on that front. I don't know if yeah, I don't know if Gemini is going to become more interesting and more used for like edge AI and Gen AI and stuff like that, because it is still a large language model, and I haven't seen anything from Google or Android yet talking about a small language model, which from what I've seen is most of the Gen AI chatbot executions in practice. So that is that kind of what you've been seeing too? Is that mostly folks are training models on their own proprietary data if they're using Gen AI in business situations at all?
Yeah, I think so. And speaking of what you were saying about efficiency and edge I thought it would be cool to slide in what Inatera is doing. Hopefully, I'll get to speak with them soon. We're in contact, so it won't be on
Nice.
this podcast, but came across
Good teaser work there. That's excellent work.
yeah, I came across some news from them, and it's about technology I've never heard about before. You probably have spiking neural networks, and they're kind
Yeah.
of focusing on dramatic gains in efficiency and moving away from traditional AI systems that are always on and, process every single piece of data continuously. And it's kind of wasteful and it's burning energy. And their technology is designed to work like the brain, and it's only supposed to be activated when there's something to even respond to. So we'll
Yeah.
get more into that, down the line when I get to interview them. But I thought it was a really cool piece of information.
That's super cool. I could not agree more. I think that the neural net, the NPU, these kinds of things are a much more interesting avenue than the GPU. Obviously, NVIDIA would disagree with me, and Intel too. Intel is heavily invested in getting, although Intel's got a lot more on the NPU side, but the I think NPUs and neural networks are a much more efficient, much more interesting way to go. I mean, the whole Gen AI world is and is approaching a cliff, an energy cliff,
Mhm.
where they're already using more water than any other industry, and
Yeah.
they're using more energy than most small nations. So like
Wow.
to for uh the purpose of global Gen AI use. And we are not getting the societal improvement out of that I would expect for that much energy. So
Mhm.
I think they're approaching a cliff if they got to figure out, there was that big news, was that earlier this year or late last year, with Microsoft taking over 3 Mile Island and maybe running the nuclear power plant there to in part power their servers for Gen AI. That would be huge, because nuclear is energy source that we should be using more.
Mhm.
Um, and they're going to need to come up with other things. All these companies are either going to have to become power companies and start selling power back to the grid after they've powered their servers, or they're going to have to be they're going to have to get more efficient, something, or we're going to have to change what we use. And I think that changing what we use makes a lot more sense, than uh, using the majority of energy that our species generates
Yeah.
toward being able to ask a machine that is sometimes right, information about whatever.
Yeah. definitely some good information for the audience at home to think about for themselves. And hopefully we'll get Inatera on and some other companies to talk about this some more. So stay tuned, everyone.
Thanks, Tara. Thanks, everybody.
Now, here's a sponsored segment with Jeff Baldwin, Director of Engineering at Sea Level Systems.
I'd like to welcome in a returning guest, Jeff Baldwin, the Director of Engineering for Sea Level Systems, as an expert on this topic of designing for the edge. How you doing, Jeff?
Great. Thanks for having me back, Rich.
Oh, my pleasure. So what we're talking about, and I'll just fill you in so you're not hitting this cold, we're talking about designing for the edge when you're bringing AI to the edge, and particularly for rugged systems. And I know that's an expertise for you guys. So let's level set. What is the edge in the definition of sea level systems?
So to us, the edge is wherever the equipment, the electronics, the application lives that's typically not inside, not right on a data center or something like that. It could be on a factory floor. It could be at a water treatment plant. It could be on a cell phone tower, but it's just somewhere not necessarily connected to the main backhaul of the world. And it
Okay.
needs to operate a bit autonomously often.
And to be clear, this is an edge computer that we're talking about.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Which is different. I had a conversation not so long ago where they define the edge as the sensor doing compute on the sensor, which is obviously very different from what we're talking here. So I just wanted to make that distinction. Okay, so let's take this one step further. Because of the expertise at Sea Level Systems, you guys do rugged systems. Does that change this definition of the edge, or does it just make it harder?
I don't think it makes it harder. It just makes the products more versatile, and it means the edge can be more locations. It could be inside in a well temperature controlled environment, or it could be, but like I said, at the top of a cell phone tower, or just some remote place in the woods that's not necessarily climate controlled. So we think the ruggedness of systems makes the edge. It just could be anywhere.
Okay, you just brought up an application that I had not thought of that's extremely harsh at a cell tower. That's way different than something that's sitting inside a factory, even that's not climate controlled, but you're looking at huge temperature swings and stuff that's getting wet. How do you do all that?
Yeah, it just starts at the early stages, at the first stages of design of understanding the environment, understand the application, what it's going to be up against, and then designing, from picking the first parts all the way to the final coatings on the enclosure. You got to make sure everything is designed to withstand that environment.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Okay, so I'm off topic a little bit. We want to talk about what it means when you bring artificial intelligence into this edge computer. And if we had this discussion 6 months ago, it would probably be different. If we have it 6 months from now, it'll probably be different because this is such a new and changing world. But what are the things your customers are using AI for today?
Yeah, one of the biggest applications that we see is visual inference. So bringing in camera feeds, either taking pictures or video feeds, and monitoring something going on in there and making really intelligent decisions on what it sees.
Is that generally for visual inspection, or am I missing something?
It could be that, or it could be environmental monitoring or safety monitoring. Seeing where people are and what's going on around them with machineries.
Okay. So is that different in the rugged environment than it is in a non-rugged environment?
Not at its heart of the technology and the job it's doing, but more just in the environment. And it needs to be, like we already discussed, kind of, rugged, reliable, be able to withstand changes. And also when you're in an edge remote application, if something does fail, it's very costly to go out and repair it. So the longer things can last without breaking is much better for that type of application. But also the resiliency of the system. So of course you want it to never fail and to run forever, but inevitably something's going to happen, something that you maybe can't control. it's going to lose power completely, or for the power outage or something like that. But as long as the system can survive through the adversity and recover and start operating again, that's also an extremely important application for the edge, especially when you're on top of a cell phone tower or on top of a mountain or somewhere else. It's just really remote and hard to get to.
Right. Based on what you said, does that mean that you should not be deploying bleeding edge technology because it has to work right all the time and you just don't want to take any chances?
No, that's not necessarily the message that I want to convey, but just have to take have the forethought and put in safety mechanisms, um, error detection and failover mechanisms, recovery mechanisms, whether it's watchdog timers and things like that, or just ubiquitous communication. No matter where you are, if you can have either a cell connection back home or a satellite communication link, if you can see what's happening and then communicate with the system and make changes remotely, then that makes it safer to have newer technology out on the edge.
Okay, here I am going off topic again. How do the folks on your team keep themselves educated on these things that are so leading edge?
hmm Lots of different ways. I mean, we learn just from doing every day, learn from talking to different customers and seeing their applications and just researching new technologies based on that. But we also, I mean, we all get, email blasts from different companies, and there's lots of good information there. And also attending trade shows and conferences and just trying to keep our thumb on the pulse of all the new stuff coming out there.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I must be difficult to do that. Is this one of those waves that's more difficult than some of the ones we've seen in the past, or is that just the media making up some fake stuff?
uh, no, I think this is a big real one. We're seeing some big changes in the world due to this one. I think IoT was the last big one that we went through in our industry, and that one's settled out a bit and become a little bit more mainstream. But no, I mean, I believe AI is real. It's changing the world already, and it's going to keep changing the world in ways that we haven't even thought of yet. So it's really interesting to watch and ride the wave with it.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm certainly glad you didn't say it was media hype because I don't want to be accused of that. Um, what are some of the most difficult parts of deploying this from your customer's perspective?
hmm Well, AI is very powerful, and the hardware acceleration needed for it is it takes a lot of power, and so re-architecting our power systems and cooling systems has been a challenge. Everything gets way higher performance every year. It's not even on the average, just power consumption level. It's the current and power consumption becomes very peaky lately. Clock rates can ramp up extremely quickly. Huge parallel processing occurs simultaneously, and so we've really had to beef up just power supplies, power delivery systems, and thermal management. Where it used to be easier to cool things, especially fanlessly, 10 years ago, but now lots of technologies using heat pipes primarily for fanless environments, but also water cooling. We're not using water cooling yet, but that's becoming more and more mainstream.
That's really interesting, and that's sort of a byproduct that people don't really consider. Um, so does that mean that your customers also have to take into consideration that they need more power to drive these systems? You can't just plug it into the wall like you do with some other system?
Yeah, it has to be a customer consideration as well. They need to make sure they have the infrastructure to power whatever system they're putting in.
Do you find that there's some level of uneducation in that respect, that they're surprised by this?
No, I don't really see that being a problem.
Oh,
I
okay.
think they have the power there. It's usually not their problem. It's usually our problem to manage on the inside the system level and make sure it can run stably over time.
Okay. Um, multiple cameras. Is that what we're talking about here in a typical system where they may have two, three, four, five inputs into a system? Is that something that they should be confident trying to deploy?
Oh yeah, it should. Yeah, that's common. And we're designing a computer that's very AI focused right now, and we've got actually three different types of camera interfaces built in, and each of them are multiple. Like, so we have 4 SDI camera inputs,
Hmm.
4 Ethernet inputs, and then 2 high-speed USBs that are all, kind of capable and designed for cameras. So it's a combination of multiple options and multiple instances.
Okay. Do you find that you're doing a fair amount of your customers' work for them, more so than had been happening in the past because AI is so complex?
It hasn't changed that a lot for us yet because we've got a nice relationship with a lot of our customers. We focus on the hardware a lot, and then a lot of times our customers' specialty is really in the end application, specialty software, um, things like that. And so and the AI, this specific, like the models they use and the processing, that still fits a little bit more into their specialty, which is nice. So they can keep ownership and continue to be the subject matter expert in their particular application, and we can just work with them and help them with the hardware to run it.
Okay. Do you see any big changes coming with respect to how people design their systems going forward? I mean, you talked about the power. Is that problem getting better, or there are other problems people need to be aware of?
Oh, I don't know about problems, but one change we are seeing, and it works real well for us again because we've just been designing computers for years using a modular computer on module architecture, which is like a modular
Hmm.
computing core, and then we can design the specialty I/O and the system around it. And lots of AI accelerators are now coming in modular form, whether it's rugged graphics cards or small M.2 AI accelerators or computer on modules based on NVIDIA's one big name in the market. They're making just computer modules now that kind of accelerates your system design speed. So it's all going in a great direction, I think, for us and the market and our customers, and just for the world.
That sounds like it can be rather tricky from a software perspective. Is it?
Um, No, it's kind of helpful in ways because when you have that computer on module, that core, the processor, the RAM, everything is a pretty tightly wound controlled system. And so when you have software and drivers and board support packages that supports that, I mean, sure, you do have to add on extra for the extra I/O and communication interfaces and the system that we build around it. But it's a pretty stable core BSP that the operating system, the drivers, everything is reusable. And so customers can start with a nice stable base of the computing and AI acceleration, and then we just build the system around it.
Okay. Um, what's the starting point for the customer? d- should they educate themselves up on AI, or they just say, well, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm good. Sea level's going to handle all that stuff for me. Where do I start?
Y- it's helpful when customers know their application and the relative level of computing and AI acceleration power they need because there are lots of options. I mean, there are like small add-in cards. I mean, you can even do a good bit of AI and inferencing with a fairly low power ARM processor with a little bit of built-in acceleration. But then if you need the more power, there are solutions going all the way up to multi-hundred watt CPU, GPU cores. So if they know the general level of processing they need, that's a good starting point. And then we can really get them into the right size of a system and then start designing the rest of it around it for
I like my starting point better. Pick up the
them.
phone, ask for Jeff, and all is good.
Yep.
All right, Jeff. I thank you for your time, and hopefully, our readers will be calling you for more information. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks.
That was Jeff Baldwin, the Director of Engineering for Sea Level Systems.
Now, here's Marcus Webster, founder and president of Webster & Webster Associates.
Good afternoon. My name is Rich Ness. I am with Embedded Computing Design. My guest this week is Marcus Webster. He is of Webster & Webster. He's the founder and CEO. And what is it that you guys do, Marcus, real quick?
We specialize in recruiting in the embedded space. So we go way back with embedded computing design in terms of relationships, but we specialize in embedded IoT and AI security realm. But the common theme is that everything we do is embedded. So we do sales, marketing, engineering, product management for embedded IoT and embedded security, embedded edge companies.
Perfect. So you're actually, I think this is the third time we've gotten together for a podcast, and we talked about things like what's going on in the market, how do you write a resume, and that kind of stuff. But you hit on a topic earlier that I was not aware was even a topic. Security as it relates to interviews or candidates. And I'm probably not saying that right. So you explain it, because you did a much better job than I did.
Well, it's kind of a warning. What's that? Warning, Will Robinson kind of moment.
Oh, you're dating yourself there.
Yes, exactly. Making a Lost in Space reference. But yeah, it's basically insider threat potential based on your interview process, basically, because a lot of companies are flooded now with resumes that are AI driven. AI is, of course, both a blessing and a curse. But part of the curse in this instance is that people are writing these resumes and they are flooding the market with, fake resumes, and companies have to figure out who's real, who's not. At this point, it's kind of a toss up on who it is. Gartner says that by 2027, 1 in 4 candidates will be fake candidates. And it's not just individual trying to get multiple jobs at the same time. Some of it's actually nation state actors who are trying to penetrate government institutions, security companies to get insider information, intellectual property, whatever they can do. But if you hire the wrong person, you can do a whole lot of damage as a matter of hours if they're inside your network, inside your system, if you don't do the proper due diligence.
Okay, so, but I understand the part about submitting fake resumes and all that stuff, but at some point the rubber has to meet the road where you actually have to do the interview. You have to go online or in person and do the interview. So what happens at that point?
Yeah, what people are doing, they are actively interviewing people, so by phone or by Zoom. But a lot of times they'll hire people maybe with a technical background to have somewhat of a conversation, but they can't typically dig deep in those conversations. Like we're doing embedded. If I'm interviewing an embedded security engineer, I have to dig deeper into it, like the projects they're doing. And sometimes they'll have a tell in terms of like they may laugh a lot during the interviews or do some other things or pretend that they're having video problems, and they may look it up on ChatGPT to find out what the real answer is. If he'd see a lot of hesitation, or there have been instances where there are people behind them, kind of lip syncing, kind of like a Cyrano, in terms of giving them the answers to go through the interview.
But what would happen if that person actually got the job? Then what?
Yeah, when they get the job, with AI you can fake degrees, IDs, certificates. So you have to have things in place to make sure that the people are who they are in terms of checking IDs, checking credentials, doing background checks, doing references, all those kind of things that you have to do.
That's really interesting. So does that mean that people who are not really qualified for these jobs are potentially getting these jobs?
Yes. And, I'm not sure of how many people we have not passed on anyone to any of our clients, because we do the due diligence to make sure they are who they are. If we get instant any whiff that they may not be real, we discontinue the conversation. But not, much smaller companies don't have an HR, aren't savvy, don't know about these things. At Embedded World, where I saw you last, I talked to every CEO about this. None of them had heard about it at all. And I was like, thank you, Marcus, let me know, and because it's a big threat, especially if you're a security company. If you get someone in the company that later one of your government clients finds out about it, the audience, the public at large finds out about it, and you're going for acquisition or IPO, you're dead in the water because your reputation is ruined.
So when you were having these conversations, were they taking this seriously, or were they sort of just blowing it off, saying, I'm not sure it's real, or it's not my problem, it's my HR department's problem?
No, they're taking it seriously. And some of our clients are already they've already had other kind of instances where they know that people are trying to infiltrate their systems, sending fake text messages, fake emails, spoofing people. So they already know they're at risk. But I just think I kind of took it to a different level for them that they have to be more diligent in terms of how they interview their client, their candidates. You have to have some kind of verification process, if that means flying each candidate in now to make sure they are who they say they are. That's the kind of things you have to do to be diligent, because
But we live in a Zoom world now where, I mean, that's how, at least in the initial go around, that's how almost all these interviews take place.
Yeah, but there are people doing deep fakes via Zoom. And what some people have done in those interviews, they've given the candidates certain instruction. They tell them ahead of time, we're trying to make sure that we're validating ID. But in one of the videos I saw, the interviewer asked the candidate to raise their hand above their head, and they couldn't do it in the interview because the AI wasn't, they could raise his hand, but it couldn't follow precise instructions. So there's deep fakes, there's fake people, and it's a lot of risk for internal fraud. And as I mentioned before, that they got people impersonating people. As I told you before, I had a candidate which I thought was real impersonating a Google candidate. What I didn't tell you is that I actually followed up with that actual real person, and I was like, hey, I just want to let you know this person is impersonating you, and he thanked me for letting him know. But a lot of people may be, especially if you're one of the FANG companies, I think, Google, Meta, people want to talk to those people, so they get excited about talking to them. But then they find out, in the end, like I did, that wasn't a real person.
Okay, so 2 questions from the 2 different perspectives. What do I do if I'm that person interviewing? And then what do I do if I'm the person at the other end interviewing the person who may not be a real person?
One thing you can do is reach out to us, and we can help you with best practices on how to deal with those kind of issues. There's a little bit of information probably out there on the web, but putting in best practices and looking for things, as I mentioned before, hesitation in interviewing, can't go deep in the conversation. Cultural questions, like I asked one candidate because I was suspicious. I was like, how'd you get that zip code? I mean, that area code on your phone number? And their answer was, very specific. I got this number in Southwest Alabama. No one would really normally say that kind of thing. So when you hear things that people don't normally say, that aren't culturally, in line with how we usually describe things, that's when my spidey senses go off. So
the only catch there is that engineers tend to not speak like regular people.
Yeah, and that could be a problem for lay people who are in. So they may get past the first round with a recruiter screen in the company. We're technical over here, so we able to dig a little deeper into the weeds and speak the same language as an engineer. But yeah, so there's been candidates with companies I know that have got to the last round before they figured out it was the wrong person. So they've gone through like 4 or 5 rounds of interviews. So I'm sure a lot of people have gone through the same thing, but how many have gotten through? And that's the question.
Wow, that is pretty amazing. So what do you do besides call you guys? I mean, if it's that prevalent out there, are there best practices?
Yes, there's FBI notice about warning the company about best practices also, but it's kind of a general, because that includes, email spoofing, having proper security in line, looking for telltale signs of candidates that may or may not. There's also software that will screen for AI, but everybody's using AI for the resumes now. So that software could also weed out good people. So you need human intelligence to kind of figure out which one are real or not. But many times I gotta tell our clients that we now are probably the first line of defense for those kind of things, because we're looking at it from a human perspective, but also a technological perspective.
That is pretty unbelievable. And I certainly thank you for bringing that to our attention. I never would have thought that this was a thing.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't. That's why I'm like letting everyone know that you have to really be careful, especially if you're hiring remote workers. You have to make sure they are who they say they are.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Marcus. I appreciate your time on this issue.
Thank you. Good talking to you again.
That was Marcus Webster of Webster and Webster, and I am Rich Nass with Embedded Computing Design.
Thanks for listening to this edition of Embedded Insiders. For more daily news, videos, and podcasts, visit our website at embeddedcomputing.com.